Raptors fans rejoice as this nightmare season has almost come to an end. In this video, we look at why and how this Raptors team is going to be back in the playoffs next season. Let's get into it. Hey Raptors fans, welcome to Amateur Sports. This is the channel where you get NBA content with a focus on the Toronto Raptors at least 4 days a week. So if you like what you see from today's video and you want more of myself talking about the Raptors in videos just like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below to show your support to the channel on our road to 3,000 subscribers. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/amateursports for Raptors watch-alongs, NBA watch-alongs, and video game content. Link is down below. But today, we're talking about why the Raptors are going to be back in the playoffs next season. And this season has been an utter disaster for a team that was a 2 seed in the NBA just this season prior. And I thought coming into this season that, sure, there was going to be some difficulties, playing in Tampa, but I thought ultimately this team still had enough to get themselves in a playoff position. In fact, I said that they would probably be around the 5 seed in the NBA this season, and people kind of consider them to be a play-in position to start the season. I couldn't quite wrap my head around, and now we're looking at a team who couldn't even get into one of those play-in positions. So it has gone very south very quickly, and it started with going south to play in Tampa, where there was a crowd that wasn't necessarily behind the team. The Raptors, who typically have the best home record in the NBA or one of the best home records in the NBA, didn't get that Scotiabank Arena crowd behind them, and definitely made a difference. And also, it didn't get off to a good start with that 2-8 start. Aaron Baines wasn't a good replacement for Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol, and this team just fell apart. And you know what? They tried to conjure up some results. They tried to get themselves back in it. At one point, they were the 4 seed in the East with a 17-17 record, but then the COVID hits and the Raptors missed 5 of their players. 3 of the 5 starters, in fact, were out for 5 games. We lose all 5 of those games, and we can't recover from there. That was the end of the season right there. We could not recover from there. But what we have seen this season from this Raptors team is that they are able to compete with some of the best talent in the NBA, some of the best teams in the NBA. They are able to compete. You don't find them, other than the month of March. If you're not looking at the month of March, we have beaten some good teams. We have beaten the Brooklyn Nets. We have beaten the Philadelphia 76ers. We have beaten the Los Angeles Lakers, and there's other teams, like the Denver Nuggets. We blew out the Denver Nuggets in one game. So we have the ability to compete with some of these good teams. And obviously, we've lost to our fair share of bad teams. But I think that one of the biggest things about the Raptors is fourth quarters. Fourth quarters have absolutely killed us this season. And right from the start of the season, it was very telling. And the clutch play has not been nearly as good for the Raptors this season as it was last season, because we could pull off those very narrow wins last season that we're not pulling off this season. And, other than that month of March where we went 1-13, this Raptors team has looked pretty good. And if it wasn't for that month of March, we wouldn't have had the month of April where, there was arguments for tanking, the arguments for not tanking, where the organization probably decided that tanking was the best thing for the franchise, and maybe that's where some results were sacrificed. A lot of guys getting rested, but ultimately, this Raptors team had a lot of talent right up until the month of March. Now, this Raptors team, who I don't think they needed a lot of things this season to go be competitive and make a playoff push, because I think that without 5 of our guys getting COVID, I think this team makes the playoffs, even with Aaron Baines as a center. Now, the team only got better when they added in the likes of Freddie Gillespie and especially Kem Birch, who has been a revelation in the center position this season. I still think this team had enough to make the playoffs, even with Aaron Baines there, because at one point, they were a 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, and maybe they would have strengthened themselves at the trade deadline. But irregardless of that, I think the Raptors team right now has enough to be a playoff team next season. However, we're heading into an offseason where we can add some pieces to strengthen this team, because there's already a very good core in place. And I think this is the biggest thing for the Raptors making the playoff next season. There is a very good core in place. There are 3 key figures to build around in this team. Number 1 is Pascal Siakam. Number 2 is OG Anunoby. Number 3 is Fred VanVleet. Siakam is a reigning All-NBA second-team player. He was an All-Star last season. In fact, started the All-Star game and, regressed a little bit this season in terms of some endeavors of his game. But in other endeavors of his game, Siakam has actually improved. Points per game, that's taken a little bit of a hit. And his field goal percentage, that stayed about the same. But his three-point percentage has taken a bit of a dip. And, that is something that is concerning. But the fact that his three-point percentage can drop like that and his field goal goal percentage as a whole can stay the same just goes to show you that Pascal Siakam has proven to be a much better scorer this season around the rim. The fact that he can keep that field goal percentage consistent with last season despite the drop from the three-point percentage. So Siakam, who's also taking a lot more shots in the mid-range now, is showing that he can be an elite scorer on the interior. And I think that he'll be able to get that three-point ball back for next season, because I think he's been working on that a lot. You know, Siakam has said in interviews that he struggles to get calls under the rims because the refs, they don't always give the respect to Toronto. They don't always give respect to Siakam. So he struggles to get those calls. So he goes through a lot of contact and doesn't get calls. So what he's trying to do is add other facets of his game where he's taking an uncontested shot. Even if it's a bit of a more difficult shot, he wants to get more shots that are uncontested. So that's why he's kind of relying on that mid-range and, you know, those floaters a little bit more often, because he wants to get the shot off without having somebody on him, without having a body on him and maybe not getting a call. So that's why he's going to these shots and yet still maintaining that field goal percentage. So Siakam, with his assists per game kind of growing, with his rebounds per game staying consistent, Siakam can improve immensely for next season. Then you look at Fred VanVleet, who before he got coronavirus was looking like he'd be an all-star this season or a fringe all-star. Almost made the team this season, and I think that we can expect Fred VanVleet to continue to improve his game and continue to improve his playmaking abilities, and I think that is something we can expect next year. Now, OG Anunoby, I've talked about this guy so much on the channel because he's 23 years old. Every time I say it, it's crazy. He's only 23 years old. He took a huge jump this season from last season, and I think that we can expect another huge jump for next season. OG Anunoby has finished the season on an absolute tear, and I think that another jump is incoming for next season. Already this season, kind of placed in the conversation for DPOY, not really threatening to win the award, but in the conversation, and I think OG Anunoby has an outside chance at making an all-defense second team this season, but I think that will continue to get better as his career goes forward, and I think his offense is going to continue to improve as well. That three is a great core to build around, and there are good pieces around these three. Again, Khem Birch has looked like a completely different player since signing for the Raptors, and there's just a lot of really good pieces on this team. You know, maybe not really good. There's a lot of NBA caliber pieces on this team, and I think that was one of the problems, again, over the course of this season. The Raptors at the start of the season, like before the season started, I looked at this roster, and I thought that there were 20 NBA-ready players on this roster. Now, there wasn't enough of those kind of really good bench pieces, though. It was very bottom heavy, but there was just a lot of just decent NBA players, but not enough of, you know, those big impact players off the bench. So even though we had a deep roster in terms of having a lot of guys, it wasn't a very top heavy in terms of depth. So we didn't have like a solid 9-man rotation to rely on, and we kept working around rotations trying to see who fit in the best. And I think that this full season has kind of showcased which sort of bench pieces we can rely on in those kind of 10th, 11th, 12th man kind of spots. And I think Bembry, Yuta Watanabe have proven to be, you know, somewhat useful to this team and some guys that we should bring back. And that will help this team because, again, I've been saying this whole video, this team I think has enough talent to make the playoffs. So why don't we go into an offseason where we can strengthen even more? We're going to have a very good pick in the draft. If the Raptors lose tonight to the Chicago Bulls, they will lock up the 7th best odds at winning the lottery. In fact, the Raptors, if they lock up that 7th best odds, have a 32% chance of winning a top 4 pick in the NBA lottery. Now, the other 68% is between 7 to 10, but there is a solid opportunity of getting a top 4 pick. Odds are we don't get a top 4 pick, but even still, somewhere in the 7 to 10 range, I think that the Raps can do very well here. I'd like to keep at the 7th spot if we don't move up, obviously, because I think that we can really land a good player there. I think once you lose that 7th pick, you move down to 8, 9, or 10, you're losing a little bit of talent there, because I think the Raptors, right in that 7th spot, can get a really high-quality shooting guard to add to this team. But regardless, the Raptors, in the drafts in the past, they have proven to use late first-round picks to be very effective in bolstering their team. They did it with Siakam, 27th overall. They did it with Anunoby, 23rd overall. The Raptors have continuously proven to be able to find the talent that fits in with their team. And I think that giving a guy like Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster, you know, the ability to draft earlier on will just increase the chances of finding a very, very good player to help out this team and be a main contributor from season 1. And also, another reason why the Raptors can be back in the playoffs is Bobby Webster has come out this week and said that he's confident that Masai Ujiri is going to come back. In fact, he doesn't even think it's a problem bringing back Masai Ujiri. So we haven't really heard anything from the front office or, any staff from the Raptors talking about bringing back Masai Ujiri yet. But the fact that Bobby Webster considers this a non-issue is super uplifting to me and for Raptors fans to see that Masai Ujiri, oh my goodness, I was starting to get a little bit worried, but he's probably coming back, and that's going to help us even more with scouting, picking players in free agency to come bolster this team that I think, again, is already in a position to make the playoffs. So a team with enough talent, with a very good young core in place with Siakam, Van Vliet, and Anunoby. All these things about it. We've added in some better pieces to support this cast. We have potential to sign and trade Lowry to other teams. And if we don't manage to pull off a sign and trade, maybe he comes back and helps us. Maybe he walks away. We have enough cap space to bring in a solid free agent. Not one of the top best free agents, but a guy who can come in and help this team. We can re-sign Gary Trent Jr. He's a restricted free agent. There is a lot of things about this Raptors team that makes me think that they are going to be better next season. The draft pick plus the free agency where we can add in an even better center than Khem Birch. If we don't, I think Khem Birch has proven to be a guy we can rely on to hold down the 5 spot. And with Chris Boucher and Freddie Gillespie also on the roster, there's no way Aaron Baines is coming back. We have a nice rotation for that 5 spot. Boucher can also move out and be a backup power forward too. So thinking about a starting lineup where we have Fred VanVleet at point guard, either Gary Trent or a drafted shooting guard at the 2. Then we have Anunoby, Siakam, and Khem Birch, or even a new center, plus a better bench now. We'll have a draft pick either there or in the starting lineup, and plus some decent pieces there like Chris Boucher. You'll have Freddie Gillespie there, who needs a full offseason under his belt to continue to improve, as is Khem Birch. There's going to be better players for this Raptors team, and they're going to assess what went wrong this season and fix it. It's easy to stick to status quo. The Raptors made the playoffs for 7 straight seasons. Easy to stick to status quo, but now the Raptors aren't quite able to do that. They are going to bolster this team even more to make themselves ready to get back in the playoffs. Do I think they're going to be a really high playoff seed? No, I don't. And I think it's going to be very difficult to make the playoffs because I think that most of the teams in a playoff position in the Eastern Conference are likely going to improve in the offseason. I think the Raptors fit that as well, but I think we have the coaching, we have the front office, we have the talent, we have the defensive mindset to get ourselves back into, I think, next season a 5 seed. But also remember, we've got a full offseason to think about as well. The offseason's got to go right. The draft has got to go right to make sure we put ourselves back where we're supposed to be in a playoff position. Judging by the poll on the channel 2 days ago, most of you think the Raptors will be back in the playoffs, but I still want to hear all of your thoughts and opinions about this video in the comments down below. But that wraps it for me for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you're still, be sure to like the video if you did like at any point to help us reach some new viewers. Also, follow us on Twitch, twitch.tv/amateursports. We're going to be watching along the game tonight. It's more than just a play-by-play, more than just a watch along. It's a great place to hang out with a great community of people. Next to my head, there is the subscribe button. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Help us reach 3,000 subscribers, and also check out some other videos in the channel. The most recent video on the bottom and another video you might like on the top. At the end of the day, believe what I say. If you disagree, that is okay. We'll see you again next time for another video.